Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Yi Kavat. Indian media says Delhi has put on hold its plans for a third 65,000-ton aircraft carrier to greenlight construction of two nuclear-powered, conventionally armed attack submarines. Meanwhile, Delhi's second mega deal to be passed recently is the purchasing of 31 US-made Predator drones at an estimated cost of $4 billion. Both are intended to modernize the Indian military. What's behind India's active military buildup, and will the attack submarines be a game changer when it comes to bringing stability to the Indo-Pacific? Joining us today are Mumin Chen, National Hsing University Graduate Institute of International Politics professor, and Sana Hashmi, Taiwan-Asia Exchange Foundation Postdoctoral Fellow, and finally Tiehlin Yen, Taiwan Center for Security Studies Deputy Director. A very warm welcome to all of you on the show today. India's lease on the Russian Akula-class nuclear-powered submarine ended in 2021, leaving the Indian Navy with 0 attack submarines in its fleet currently. Delhi's plans to lease another Akula-class submarine from Moscow were thwarted by global sanctions against Russia for its ongoing war in Ukraine. In the end, Delhi agreed to the 2 submarines to be manufactured in India with 90% indigenous content at a cost of $1.8 billion per sub. Experts say the first homegrown attack sub will realistically enter the Indian Navy by 2040. Professor Yen, let me come to you first. So why does India need these attack subs now in its armada?
It's absolutely needed. Since Indian Navy already have 2 nuclear ballistic missile submarines. First, in order to protect these 2 nuclear ballistic boats, it needs attack submarine. Secondly, this attack submarines, the nuclear powered can dive deeper and stay under the water a rather longer time.
So they can be stealthy and it's very hard to detect where they are. Why is it that people call these nuclear powered submarines the jet fighters of the seas, from your experience?
Because it seems to everybody that attack submarine is the master of the sea. If you want to control the sea, you want to establish command of the sea, you really need this kind of weapon system because it's an advantage of a stealthy. And it's faster than the conventional subs, diesel engine subs.
Okay. Yeah. Professor Chen, so do you think that India is concerned about China's numerical advantage in these nuclear-powered subs?
Yeah, of course. Actually, if we see Indian history, you find that the first few decades, India's threat are mainly from the land, particularly from China and also Pakistan. But China entered Indian Ocean in 2008 or 9. They first sent fleets to fight the Somali pirates. And then in 2013-14, when Xi Jinping started talking about Belt and Road Initiative, China became more active. Now, every year, they send naval fleets to the Indian Ocean because the Indian Ocean is a lifeline, energy and also a commodity lifeline for China. And so for India, now the threat is not just from the land, also from the sea. So I think for India to deploy attack submarines in the Indian Ocean is a natural consequence.
Right. And Sana, do you think that this has then forced any shift in India's strategy when it comes to the Indian Ocean?
I won't really call it a shift because India has been focusing on maritime security cooperation and strengthening its naval capabilities at least since the late 2000s. Of course, China has been an important factor in that because India talks about cooperation in the maritime domain. But with China, it's direct competition. So I do believe if you really want to counter China's string of pearl strategy, you have to strengthen your naval capability. So of course, India does have other interests, but China definitely tops the list of why India is developing and steadily and so rapidly developing its naval capabilities.
Right. American naval strategist Alfred Thayer Mann famously wrote in 1890, "Whoever rules the waves rules the world." Mann argued that national prosperity and sea power depended on control of the world's sea lanes, power projection and access to bases. And Indian expert Keshav Vadiya's response to that in 1949 was, "Even if we do not rule the waves of all the 5 oceans of the world, we must at least rule the waves of the Indian Ocean." Vadiya was the author of the Naval Defense of India. Sana, if I could stay on you, how much influence do you think Mann plays in terms of India's approach to the Indian Ocean today?
It does play a significant role in how India now sees itself as a maritime power. And of course, the geographical expansion of India's influence, specifically in the Indian Ocean region, has to come with the naval capabilities. It has to be with the Indian Ocean region. But while China is an emerging key player in the Indian Ocean region, India has been a resident naval power. India has a 7,500-kilometer coastline. And apart from that, of course, competition with China is one major factor. But apart from that, there are significant interests of India. One, that India is thinking about its own commercial, non-commercial interest in the region. Apart from that, India is also thinking about regional stability. And then, of course, competing with China. And if you look at it, of course, India, whatever happens in the Indian Ocean region is directly going to impact India. So India is a resident power. So I think this is something that has played a key role in India's strategy in the Indian Ocean region.
Professor Yen, as Professor Chen mentioned, has been gradually encroaching on that. What can we say about the bases that we know China has had access to in the Indian Ocean?
Yeah, firstly, the Mann theory on the control of the sea or command of the sea or sea control is 100 years old, more than 100 years old. By then, there's no high sea freedom, no freedom of navigation, but today is an international norm. You have high sea freedom, you have freedom of navigation. So the old concept, you cannot completely 100% apply to today's situation. So for the security of India, I certainly understand the modernization of its Navy forces. It has its value. So when the time comes, when there's a crisis or there's a potential armed conflict in the Indian Ocean, they have to ensure that they have the capability to deny enemy's naval force while use the Indian Ocean to attack India. That's what all about is the modernization. So you can easily see it's force planning in the 2040, 2030. You have the 3 aircraft carrier force and 4 submarines. You can nuclear power ballistic missile submarine. You can establish effective, credible nuclear deterrence capability. Then you have about 8 or 10 nuclear attack submarine. All of those weapon systems to ensure that during the wartime or during the crisis that they can have a deterrent effect. If deterrence fails, they can have a capability to defend itself.
Okay. Sana wanted to jump in and then I'll go to Professor Chen.
I think what Captain Yen talked about, I think it's very apt because we have to really mention that India still believes in no first policy when it comes to its nuclear doctrine. So it's all for deterrence.
No first use.
No first use. So it's all for deterrence. It's all, because China has specifically become the primary security threat. And in the maritime domain, we are seeing what it's doing with the Taiwan Strait, South China Sea, in the Indian Ocean region. So I think it's just a form of deterrence. If China attacks India, India has an answer to respond.
Well, what you're saying is China is the aggressor.
Absolutely.
Okay. Professor Chen, I want to pick up on something that Professor Yen had spoken about, a very good point. He said, Mann's theories are from 100 years ago. Do you think that maybe we asked the question, how far is India being influenced by those theories from Mann? But how much has China been influenced? And those are the theories, from previous hegemonies, of the naval powers of Britain and the US from 100 years ago. How much is it trying to emulate that now?
Yeah, a lot. You see that China started its Navy modernization in the 1990s. So everything they have been doing is to copy the US. And we know that the U.S. is a superpower in the world even today, and the most powerful force in the U.S. is a Navy force. It has aircraft carriers all over the world. And so China, first they get into the South China Sea, and then to the Indian Ocean. So eventually China planned to build a world-class naval power. And so this will challenge the interest of many other countries. You see in the Indian Ocean, no major power in the Indian Ocean except India. So that is why India play a significant role in maintaining the security and stability of the Indian Ocean.
And if we could revisit something that you mentioned earlier, you spoke about, how China was, more and more being present in the Indian Ocean. Now, I understand that in the lead up to the Doklam crisis, which was in June to August of 2017, for the first time, PLA Navy submarines caused a stir because in 2014 they docked for the first time at Colombo port in Sri Lanka, and then the first nuclear-powered submarine docked at Karachi port, which is in Pakistan. That was in 2016, and this sort of presence continued throughout, 27 and probably beyond. Now India itself has done that. So at some point, it also moved its one of those Russian Akula class that we mentioned to the eastern side of the Indian Ocean. And that was during one of the border conflicts with China. So can we see that actually nuclear submarines add to the threat or offset the threat from land forces, that it becomes a very combined theater of war?
Of course, because India now knows that the threat from China is not just from the land, also come from the sea. So actually for India to have a comprehensive strategy facing China's threat is very important. So in the past, India spent most of its defense budgets for its army. But right now, I think perhaps because of the U.S. and Japan and other countries also encourage India to play a more important role in the Indian Ocean. So now I think that India also consider that the naval modernization in the Indian Ocean is extremely important right now.
Okay. Professor Yen, currently only a few nations, I'll list them, U.S., U.K., France, China and Russia, possess the capability to build nuclear-powered submarines. So what does this say about India's ambitions?
He's a nuclear power, absolutely, and trying to establish triad, maritime-based nuclear capability, land-based. Probably in the future, the nuclear bomber, the bomber can carry nuclear bomb to fly 5,000 or 6,000 kilometers to the target and drop bomb and come back. So that's very, very ambitious because it's a big country with 1.4 billion people and a huge military. It's the number 2 or number 3 in the world. So without nuclear deterrence capability, it would be not in par with this international status. Not to mention, China recently has become very aggressive and assertive. You just point out that the Chinese nuclear attack submarine been to the Indian Ocean a couple of times. That really pose a threat to India's security because all those nuclear attack submarine is a threat to India's nuclear ballistic missile submarine. So that's a vivid threat. And the nuclear ballistic submarine is backbone of a deterrence capability because it owns the second strike capability. That's it's the essence of a mutual assured destruction. So they need to protect the nuclear ballistic submarine. If there's an enemy or hostile attack submarine in the vicinity, that's a huge threat to India.
Okay, so the nuclear attacks submarines are needed to protect India's own nuclear-armed
Second strike capability. They need to ensure they have a second strike
Sure.
capability.
Sure. Okay, Professor Chung, want to jump in?
Okay, when we say the nuclear triad, it means that the ICBM, bombers and also sea launch ballistic missiles.
Yes.
So right now, very few countries in the world acquire this capability. U.S., Russia, and China. And so I think that the key to India become a world-class naval power is that whether India has this capability, that it has the sea launch ballistic missile.
Yeah.
Which I think that India is trying to have it.
Yeah, very interesting. And Sana, I want to get your view because Professor Chen just mentioned something very interesting when it comes to the nuclear building. It's the Permanent Five, United Nations Security Council, the 5 nations who have that capability. Now India is joining that group, so it's going right up there in terms of world influence, if we want to say that. But in terms of the nuclear triad, as Professor just mentioned, the US, Russia, and China only now. India with its Arigat submarine. So it's effectively displaced, we could say, France and the UK in that grouping.
Yes.
What do you think that means?
No, absolutely, and if you look at it, India is definitely strengthening its partnership with France. We are seeing there's a lot of naval cooperation, there's a lot of defense cooperation that is going on between France and India. But I do feel that there is this lack of trust between the US and India as well. There have been a number of agreements, logistic agreements, technology transfer agreement that have been signed, but I do not see any concrete step that has been taken. So for India right now, the only option is perhaps to continue its cooperation with Russia. But having said that, India, specifically after the war, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, what India has been doing is to diversify away from Russia, as well as, of course, trying to strengthen partnership with countries such as France, UK, US. And apart from that, there is a heavy reliance on its own strategy called Make in India and self-reliance. How do you make your indigenous submarines? How do you strengthen your naval and maritime capabilities on your own? So this is something that India has been looking at.
Okay. Professor Yen, the other mega budget that was passed, as we mentioned at the top of the show, was a 31 American, and they're the MQ-9B Predator drones, and they will be delivered over the next 4 years. Now, 15 will go to the Navy, and the rest will go to the Air Force and Army. Can you tell us a little bit, perhaps, about these drones? How will they enhance them at the Indian military?
We are going to buy 4 of them.
Taiwan is, yes.
Exactly same one. They call the Sea Guardian. So based on that name, you can understand that's for reconnaissance and surveillance function, in the maritime area.
So it's improving situational awareness?
Certainly, yes, situational awareness. So that for them, 15 of them is not allowed because not enough. I think they need to have 30. You need to have a 24/7 capability to have all those drones cruising, conducting reconnaissance or surveillance in the important area to ensure that there's no threat or no submarines, no surface hostile combatant in that area.
Right, and they're also able to carry weapons, so they can also hit targets in the
yes,
in
it's
the sea,
capable to
land,
carry
air.
weapons. Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay. Do you think, Professor Yen, that India is prioritizing sea challenges? I mean, 15 to the Navy.
Yeah, compared with the border disputes, I think they focus more, as far as in time being, on the modernization of the naval forces. Right. It's very obvious. It's a huge shipbuilding plan in the next 10, 15 years. So that tells a lot.
Yeah. The 2 subs will bring India's total number of nuclear-powered subs to 4. India currently has 2 nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines constructed under the Advanced Technology Vessel project named INS Arihant and INS Arigat. The second sub officially began service in August this year. Construction began around 2017 and took 7 years to complete. Professor Chen, if I can ask you, so Taiwan itself completed its first indigenous diesel submarine, the Narwhal, last year, and that was seen as an incredible feat itself for Taiwan. How complex is it to be able to build not only a nuclear-powered, but a nuclear-powered and nuclear-armed submarine?
it's extremely difficult because, yeah, I think that even in the world today, only a few countries has such technologies. Building a conventional submarine is not that difficult. We are doing, yeah, but nuclear power submarine, I think that for Taiwan, I don't think we can do that. It is because it doesn't really meet Taiwan's defense needs. No,
but again, another reflection on the, the industrial complex of India. Sana, so the subs have been reported as destined for the Indian Ocean, but do you think that they will be working in the future, or possibility of them working in conjunction with the AUKUS subs, or indeed, the subs of other allies around the region? And then, what will they add to that collective deterrence?
I hope so. I'm not sure how the future cooperation looks like specifically between AUKUS and India. Ideally, specifically the timing of AUKUS aligns with the rejuvenation and the elevation of Quad to the leaders level. So I do hope and I do feel there is complementarity between AUKUS and India's own approach, as well as the role that India is playing in the Indian Ocean region. But of course, India believes in strategic autonomy, issue-based coalition. So how far does it go? And all these alliances are among the Western countries. So India is still not considered a country that is fully aligned with the objectives and with the rules-based order that have been prescribed by the Western countries.
Right.
So how do we bridge this gap? I think it's in the process. There is an attempt to have more trust between India and the Western countries, but we have to see. Of course, China is a major concern. China is a common concern, a binding factor. And if we have to deal with China, in the maritime domain, you cannot alienate India. And I keep saying this, that Indo-Pacific exists primarily because of India and India's capability to counter China. So I feel that the ball is in the court of perhaps the US, the Western countries, Japan. Japan has totally been in alignment with India's capabilities and India's role. So I do believe US has to play a bigger role over here.
I wanted to end on kind of talking about the Indian Ocean, Professor Yen, and what role that it would play, possibly, in any South China Sea or Taiwan Strait crisis.
Absolutely. India's position is in the Mahan said, a choking point. So there were two choking points, Home Strait and the Malacca Strait. That's one on the right-hand side of the India, the other on the left-hand side. Right. So they are in a very geopolitical position, geographical position to control these two choke points. And not to mention, about more than 40% of energy come from China imported come from Middle East. They have to go through these two straits. So India has a good geopolitical and geographic position to control, to blockade China's energy import. But one thing I need to emphasize is, India is building 7 or 8 nuclear attack submarines. We mentioned AUKUS early on. Australian is going to have a nuclear attack submarine as well. Not to mention United States always have
more than 7.
5 to 6 submarine in the East Asia area, in the South China Sea, as well as the Indian Ocean. Submarine always operate independently. They cannot hand in hand with the other country's submarine, but coordination is very important. If not alliance, if it's just a friendly nation, and you have a common goal, the common goal is to deter the aggressiveness, assertiveness of China. All those submarine forces in South China Sea and the Indian Ocean has to be coordinated. But to that step, there's a lot of efforts need to make, a lot of foreign policy engagement or meal-to-meal exchange and confidence need to establish it first.
So you mean beyond the military drills that we've seen recently, the 3 exercises?
That's still far behind it. Okay. I mean, it's a long way to go.
Okay.
Because that's a secret. Your submarine's position is a secret to everybody. We do not want to reveal our submarines' position to other countries, even friendly.
Okay, I wanted to pick up Professor Chen with you, and then we'll probably have to end the show. On what Professor Yen had said, he talked about, you know, the importance of the Malacca Strait, and yes, the fear of China is that, you know, their access to oil, half of China's oil comes through the Indian Ocean, could be cut off, you know, raw access to raw materials, critical goods, and so on. So is it that in order to continue those supplies, is it that China would have to escort those ships of oil? Say if we're talking about wartime, and then that would divert away resources from the conflict?
China already estimated that kind of situation might happen. So also in recent years, China also built pipelines through Myanmar and Pakistan to China. They want to reduce the risk that the Malacca Strait and also Indian Ocean being blocked by India or other countries.
And this is in preparation for a possible Taiwan crisis?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, we'll have to end it there. Yeah. Thank you so much, Sun Mumin, Sana Hashmi, and Professor Tiehlin Yen. If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching the show today. Stay safe and see you next time.
The White House has announced a $50 billion,
$6.6 billion US dollars
for semiconductor.
TSMC's come out of the 2022 CHIPS Act.
I want competition with China, not conflict.
Taiwan punches above its weight when it comes to creating chips.
The entire world has great interest in keeping Taiwan's chip industry functional.
So the silicon shield that supposedly has been protecting Taiwan, is there a silicon shield?
We take an exclusive look inside one of the 7 chip design firms picked to make India a semiconductor giant.
How many years the TSMC can still maintain its competitive edge?
People here in Japan are calling it the TSMC shock.
Why is Japan so eager to restore its past glory?
What do you see as the next big shift in the semiconductor industry?
Taiwan's take on global headlines. All that matters, Taiwan Plus.